Welcome to another episode of the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast, where we reimagine what's possible and challenge conventional thinking. Today, we're diving into transformation myths with a true innovator, Shannon Lucas. Shannon is a global thought leader in entrepreneurship and corporate innovation with over 20 years experience driving transformation in Fortune 500 companies and startups alike. She's an innovation powerhouse and the co-founder of Catalyst Constellations, where she is on a mission to empower change agents and create sustainable engines for transformation. Today, we're going to dive into what it really takes to make innovation stick. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this conversation every time I encounter you. It's always brain on fire when we're done. So
absolutely. Back at you.
So before we dive into our topic, I would just love to hear from you how you define what it is that you do day to day, because it is really unique and fascinating. And what are some of the highlights of your journey that actually led you to that work that you're doing today?
Yeah, it's really the best way into the work to understanding the work that I do. So I'll jump in the middle of my story. I had gotten a degree in art history, became a network engineer as one does, fell into the dark side of sales engineering, and eventually got tapped to help build out the innovation program at Vodafone. The hypothesis that we were building out that sort of global program on was that there were positive troublemakers all over the world. Vodafone, for those who don't know, is one of the world's largest mobile telephony companies. And so we built this innovation champion program to connect those people, to create a shared language, tool set, all of the things, remove the barriers. It was wildly successful, to make a long story short, like tens of millions of in-year revenue, hundreds of millions in pipeline, product to market, all of the things that, you hope an innovation program will do. And I was pretty naive about actually our success. But about 3 years in, I started really burning out. The champion program had grown significantly. And I found myself traveling around the world trying to activate about 70% of these volunteers who we called innovation champions. And I couldn't figure out what it was that separated sort of the 30%, no matter how big the sort of cohort grew. But there were this 30% who were these like core people, like I showed up, who would like do it despite having rewards or recognition or visibility, right? But I was spending almost all my time trying to activate these other people and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, they volunteered, like you had to volunteer. Anyway, so because I was burning out, my college roommate suggested that I get an executive coach. And that coach is now my co-CEO, Tracy Lovejoy.
Oh, she's awesome. I did coach with her once and it was just, even just that, I think it was a half an hour, still impactful.
Amazing. I feel the same way. She's like a world-class coach, particularly for these people that we now call catalysts. So she's an ethnographer and researcher by trade, had led innovation teams at Microsoft using those skills. But when she became a consultant, she's like, who's my ideal customer profile? And at that point, there really wasn't any research out there about these fire starters, right? The people who are like out there creating change, even when no one asks them to, even when they become sort of, the lightning bolt of resistance. So after we had been working together for a while, she included me in her research, but happily it was towards the end of her research. And so she was able to share out what she had found about these people that we now call catalysts. And I remember where I was sitting when she shared it with me, like at the Starbucks on Broadway in Burlingame, California, because it was like being hit by the bolt of lightning. And I was like, oh my God, I've never felt so seen. The only word I had before that was that word entrepreneur, but I had started my own companies. I had been at startups. Entrepreneur didn't follow me around and describe.
Yeah. That's what I experience. Entrepreneur doesn't fit who I am.
Yeah, because we will go most often wherever we think we can have the biggest impact. Whatever the next problem is, that is like, this is the place I need to go solve that problem.
Yeah. I called them wicked tricky problems. Delicious for my brain.
100%, totally. Let me at it. I almost don't care what it is.
Yeah.
It describes too, though, obviously what I was seeing in this innovation champion team. It's like, okay, that 30%, those are the people I want to support. I don't have to cajole them or bribe them or do anything to convince them to create change. Doesn't mean we're good at creating change. So let's just be clear. This is why we created things like the Catalyst Leadership Trust. Like, we can be big and bold and loud and too much and all of the things, but we don't have to convince those people. So that's what we do now, is we work with organizations to help them identify, train, and activate their catalyst across the organization to solve those big, wicked, fun problems.
That is so awesome. I love the work that you're doing. And I have really enjoyed being a part of your Catalyst Trust. It's so wonderful to find your people. I've spent most of my career in the finance industry, where true innovators who are driven by being these fighter starters can very easily burn out, because in a risk-averse environment, you're a threat.
Totally.
Because
Literally.
You're questioning the status quo that those organizations are designed foundationally to protect.
It's exactly why I was so excited to co-create the Catalyst Leadership Trust, because the other thing, even in non-risk, as non-regulated or risk averse environments, if you think about the structure, like, my last role is EVP of emerging business. Like, if you're successful in the change role that you were brought in to do, by definition, you are threatening the other parts of the business that are based on different parts of the S growth curve than we are. And so so having a safe place where you are not terrifying the people who are around you at the table, and getting the support and troubleshooting. The other thing that we know is, obviously, burnout is real. So we wrote a book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout, the Catalyst Guide to Working Well. And our natural state as Catalyst creates a propensity, let's say, to burnout. But what we know from the data is catalyst being with other catalysts is one of the biggest recharge moments. And it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, it's that being seen and supported and feeling safe. So like when we have our, group coaching in large corporates, and the catalysts are all coming like with super change fatigue, and they're like, oh, I just can't do another thing. By the end of the hour or 90 minutes together, they are fired up and ready to go again.
Yes. And I have actually experienced that. I feel re-energized. It's almost like plugging into a battery recharger or something. It's like, okay, I can take on the crazy once again. I found this happening in the equipment finance industry. So I've been leading an innovation council for the largest trade association for 6 years. We're going to be moving on and leaping forward and doing something different with innovation in that space. But, for the past 6 years, it's been really interesting to watch, as we bring this group together each month, this cross-section of senior and C-level leaders. What I was hearing, when we came to the end of it, it's like, oh my gosh, this was so valuable, because I had a place where I could get away from day to day and explore future possibilities with other people that really genuinely want to do the same.
It's like being a kid in a candy store, and it's fun listening to you tell your story, because as the facilitator, I get so much energy out of going too. I'm like, because you guys will bring your burning issues or whatever. And I'm like, ooh, that is so on point, because you guys are always also at the forefront of whatever the universe is contemplating, right? I'm like, oh my God, we get to spend time. Like, we'll be talking about, organizational network analysis. And then we'll be talking about how change management might be dead, and like just these really provocative topics. And it's like, yes, let's dive in and do that.
Yeah. Well, okay. Speaking of change management, this is a topic that is one of those burning issues that comes up continually in my world. And interestingly, I think it's happening elsewhere. So I want to just kind of start with, this infamous statistic. McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and others have been saying for years that 70%, now even sometimes they're saying 80% of transformational initiatives fail to deliver their intended value. And so, I saw that and I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I help my clients be a part of the 30% or the 20% that actually do succeed? And so I went on this mission to find out, like, what is causing these failures? And often what I found is that the big consulting firms are conveniently claiming that the reasons for these failures squarely place the blame on the customer.
It's so
it's like, oh, your aspirations were too high.
Right. You didn't
not
invest
enough investment. Totally. Not enough focus. And
That's right.
I would love to challenge that and get your perspective on that. I've got some thoughts on it too, but you've been doing this all over the world for years. Why do truly transformational initiatives struggle? And what's missing from this narrative?
Yeah. I mean, it is really funny. I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but it is really, I would be embarrassed if I was selling this business that never actually demonstrated any impact over decades. Like, it's one thing to prove the case originally, but anyway.
Yeah.
So I totally agree. It's a massive problem. And there's a couple key reasons that we see. A big one is that they treat everything as one size fits all. Right. And this is why the provocative statement too about, is change management dead? You can't go in with a static playbook that the last 10 customers you've learned from, and you're going to try and replicate it in this environment, because every environment is completely unique. And the level, I love working with an ethnographer. Like, that's my co-CEO, because she goes in and she studies cultures and people. And so that level of ethnographic understanding of the cultural context is super important. So that's sort of like writ large. The second thing, though, is that those processes underneath that treat all people as having the same relationship with change, which is ridiculous, right? Like, you have these people who we call catalysts on the sharp end who are like, let me at it. And you have half of a normal distribution curve who are going to actively fight you on it. Right. And so, like, if you aren't thinking really intentionally about where you're engaging the fire starters and how you're giving them the skills to bring the early adopters along, and then they're bringing the, early majority along, you're dead before you've even started. Like, you've amplified sort of the latent resistance that's in the organization. And then, the last thing I would say is there's this interesting thing going back to the cultural piece a little bit, but it's a nuance. Is there's usually the aspirational cultural state that they want to get to, which is the transformational outcomes are dependent on, and they might even all agree about like what those values or mindsets or things might be. But they don't understand the bridging function of, like, you can't just wave your magic wand and get everyone there. And so again,
Yes.
activating these change agents, these catalysts, to understand what the current cultural context is and help bridge to that aspirational context.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So much. And what you just said, it really resonates for the work that we do. Is we're driving innovation with our friends in equipment finance and beyond. One of the things that we talk about often is how important it is to understand context and co-create the big picture of the shared context, so that as you're beginning this journey, everybody's starting from the same starting line. I mean, if you imagine you sign up to be in some awesome marathon, but the starting line is secret.
Totally.
That's kind of how projects start, especially when they're cross-functional and enterprise level, and so many moving parts and so much complexity. And so, the context really matters. And I love that that's one of the things that you're really focusing on. But then the other thing that I took away from what you were just saying is how, when you don't take time to really study how all of the different stakeholders relate to change, you can, unintentionally amplify resistance. And, one of the things that we're often involved in is coaching leaders and their teams through digital transformations, not actually doing the hands-on implementation, but helping them understand how to actually think about this and how to communicate and make great decisions so they don't reel themselves. And one of the things I've noticed is that there is nothing that will amplify and expose dysfunction faster than taking on a digital transformation.
Really good insight. Totally. Yeah. You can be humming along, and yeah, it's so true. And so when you start to look at like what's underneath the cover, and that's, I think, why, we've seen this really, it's like such a big challenge for them to recognize what the actual current state is versus the aspirational one. Because it's also like, it's that look in the mirror. It's like, ooh, do we really want to know what the state of our culture is right now? not sure.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's actually where it is valuable to have a facilitator, because it can create the safe space for you to be really honest about that. What's going on in your people, your processes, your technology? What are the forces of change that are impacting you, your business, your customers, your partners, and really have honest conversations about that, but also co-create that big picture together so that we all have a shared understanding of where we're starting from to drive this transformation. I wanted to kind of get into another element of this, just kind of the reality of driving a transformation like that. And you've worked inside Fortune 500 companies leading major transformational efforts. From your perspective, what are the real challenges that can derail these change efforts, and where are organizations getting it wrong?
I think it's a great segue, because the first point that I was going to talk about here is sort of a leadership mismatch for where the company is and needs to go sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And so the CEOs and the C-suite who navigated through, pretty constant times with minimal change and maximized growth and profit and all of that stuff in that environment, it's a completely different skill set to now take your company and continue to not just survive and thrive in these times. I mean, like, look at the sort of macro worlds that were like, my head's spinning, right? And
what's
so, like,
the disruption of the day? That's the question I'm asking.
Massive geopolitical disruption. These aren't like small stock fluctuations, right?
Right.
And so what does leadership look like then to navigate through this constant change, this constant ambiguity? I think connected with that is the people, especially at the top, have to be able to have the very transparent conversations. And so going back to the last thing that we were saying is, if it is not psychologically safe in that room to look at a problem, identify a problem, and not place blame, but actually, like, all of these leaders go around and we need to fail fast. Okay, when is the last time you guys had a fail conversation at the board level or C-suite level? Right? Did someone raise their hand and say, hey, I fucked up. I totally failed. Like, no, we don't do that. But this is where they need to model what psychological safety really looks like and what experimentation looks like. It's like, you're not bad. You're not a bad person because you didn't hit a number in these times of chaos. What will keep you in the sort of negative column is if you can't admit that the thing that you were doing isn't working anymore and you're not open to the exploration of the new thing. So that's one, the leadership mismatch. The other one is, and this is like super emergent for us right now, is the focus on structure versus the behavior change and mindsets.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's like, we have been seeing reorg after reorg. Like, I get the C-suite shakeups. They have to happen for the reason that I just said. But what happens underneath that is, well, we'll just create a new org structure and that will save all of our problems. No, in 6 months, that org structure is going to be irrelevant anyway. And so we started talking about it like, you can't build your org structures with concrete. You have to build them with Legos, right? Because in 6 months, you need to be able to pick up those pieces and create a new thing over here that then 4 months later is going to be redistributed across the organization.
Yeah, it's almost like a continuous recombination.
That's it. And so that's the behavior piece. And then, sort of a sub bullet to that whole thing is incentives. Because if you have these top down incentives that are also set in concrete and they're not rewarding behavior and culture change, like, that's the fundamental piece, right? And people, we see it. If you keep one toxic person in a team, the team is going to underperform no matter how many overachievers you have in that. And then obviously, I think the final thing, which goes back to something that we were talking about, is organizations don't understand yet that they have these hidden gems of these catalysts, these hidden change agents. And so they are also treating it like a one size fits all, or like they'll have leadership development or high potential, but the high potential, in my experience, is largely a political game. Someone can take a KPI or an objective or a goal, crush it, and manage up really well so that everybody knows that that person crushed these people that we're talking about, these fire starters who love to solve your biggest wicked challenges. they operate in the seams. They're working on things that haven't even been defined as problems yet for the organization. So there's often no business sponsor for them. They have no incentives aligned to them, and they're helping your company anyway. So can you imagine if you could harness that potential and actually give them the guardrails to go solve your things and then incentivize them on top of it? They won't do it for that, but you'll keep them a long time if you do that.
Yeah. It's a gold mine of untapped energy and ingenuity.
I know. I hope for the listeners, there was a really interesting point that you said earlier about when the Catalyst Leadership Trust comes together. It's like you tapped into this battery pack, but that happens even if everyone who comes in is depleted. It's like this weird kind of like magic energy creation, right? It's like you don't even need the one person who's buoying you up. It's just like when you bring these people together, the idea of possibility together is so recharging.
Yeah. And that's the magic. It's when, you're connecting not only with new ideas, but with each other. You mentioned something really interesting. I was really curious about that leadership mismatch point that you made and the challenge of leading from what is and transitioning to what if, different skill set, different mindset. And one of the challenges, I see this challenge often, leaders don't know how to model psychological safety or experimentation. Can you share just a story or an illustration? Like, what does good look like when it comes to a leader who is leading through these disruptive changes and modeling good psychological safety and experimentation?
Yes, there are. I mean, even just in the Catalyst Leadership Trust, there are so many amazing examples. I'll pick one who you'll know, but I won't name her. But a chief people officer at a large industrial company. She's actually also featured in our book. She has a sort of a strong, self-care, rejuvenation, all of those things, which is part of the reason that we call her out, because her presence and her ability to listen, she didn't come up through HR. She came up through design and research, like having those ethnography skills and things like that. And her deep listening, right? And her ability to start at this company that is an older legacy industrial company and have it pivot to being like one of the best places to work. She shows up and she just creates space, and she's such a deep listener, and she can help people in the room get to the thing that they don't even know that they're saying yet, right? So just how she shows up in the space that she creates. And I'm thinking about other like people who are modeling or bringing in these Catalyst programs that we do, and they all have some of that deep listening skill. We did the Catalyst Wisdom Exchange, and we collected sort of the attributes of these people, which I think was really interesting. But there's sort of this like fundamental self-awareness piece and the vulnerability piece that we don't often talk about because it feels fluffy. But it's actually foundational. I'll send you a link. I just listened to this talk on Davos, from Davos, led by Adam Grant. It had a bunch of global CEOs and actually a couple of industrial companies. And they were talking about the future of leadership. And what they were talking about was it wasn't hard skills, and it wasn't even business modeling. It was empathy, it was the ability to listen. It was the ability to connect dots. I think, what I'm encouraging leaders that we work with to do is to model their own failure. So like one organization, we had this thing called the failure resume. So we had like 100 people from across the organization on this, 2-day innovation thing. And we got a panel up there and we asked the 4 leaders, everyone's going to do their failure resume. We want people to understand that failure, you couldn't be where you are in your job today if you hadn't failed at some point, right? You had to have learned something. And to have like the SVP sit there and talk about her personal fails in front of 100 people, it's super important. It's super important. And then the final thing I'll say around this and the psychological safety is we don't give people guardrails for defining failure. We'll have a culture and we'll be like, fail fast, fail early, fail early. I mean, we'll even talk about the learnings, but it's like, what are the guardrails? Because I'm pretty sure like if we lost our biggest customer, you're not happy, right? If my prototype failed fast, you'd be celebrating me. But that's a big range. So help me understand how to fail and what's safe.
Those guardrails are so important. And I could spend like 2 hours with you on this, but we got a couple more things to cover before we hit the top of our time here. It's really evident that mindset and behavior is vital in all of this, what are some of the specific behaviors that would need to be cultivated in order to make change stick in an organization?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm going to just reemphasize, we've talked about it, but psychological safety and experimentation, they go hand in hand. And like, if you are not like basing your culture on that, it's going to be really hard because the cycle of change is too fast.
Okay. Yeah.
The other thing I would say, and this is from another Catalyst Leadership Trust member, but she always talks about empowerment plus accountability equal results. And I think it's such a nice formula because people will talk about either accountability or empowerment. It's actually like more and more leaders are leaning into the empowerment, but like a psychologically safe accountability is really tough. It's not something that we've been taught. Like when you're a kid, you either get in trouble or you don't, right? I mean, it's like there's all of these things in society. You either get an A or an F. There isn't a lot of like soft accountability. I want to help you grow. How do I balance psychological safety and experimentation with accountability? This goes back to the failure thing. Like you still have to be hitting some targets, but I know that's going to be hard. And so that's one of the things. But then that has to be across, like we do these giving and receiving feedback workshops with organizations that we work on. And when people, their minds are blown when they're like, I can hold my peers accountable. Just like, yeah, and you should.
Yeah, right? And this is a major issue that we run into often when we're looking at projects that have derailed and we're trying to get them back on track, or we're working with companies to improve customer and employee experience. But what we find is not about just revamping processes or the way that you're interacting. What we're finding is that we need that mindset shift. We need to empower people. And one of the biggest gaps I'm finding is that we have perfectly good policies and processes, but there is no reinforcement or accountability when you don't adopt those. And so adoption is like one of the biggest gaps I'm seeing. We've got no shortage of ideas and innovations, but there's no bridge between innovation and adoption. And often that bridge is more like that Indiana Jones movie bridge where like each step pops up, as you take a step. Right. That's what it's like, So I think that all these things that you're talking about are vital to be able to even, take on change in such a wildly disruptive world.
Totally. And we do a lot of work with the sort of pyramid from Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions, because the bottom part is trust. And if you haven't, and again, people feel like this is fluffy, but no, I need to know about your background, like how many siblings you have and all the things that are like, make us human and develop trust. Because the very next thing that comes on top of that is our ability to work through conflict. And holding someone accountable, a peer accountable on a team. No one's ever told you that that's okay. Though, of course, if you're dependent on them to deliver something, running to mommy and daddy and coming back down is a terrible solution. You're going to erode trust, right?
Yes.
And so, I'm conflict averse. I don't know a lot of people who are like, yay, conflict. But if we were given more time and practice to actually give structured feedback in a way where it's like, I'm not attacking you. This is what I need. I'd love to understand what got in the way. Here's how it impacts me. What can we do? Kind of the co-creation to the, like, maybe you're really busy or maybe your life is falling apart. Like there's a lot of things that I might make assumptions about. And so like, how do we hold each other accountable? And then finally, I would say just the continuous learning and the adaptability. So I think if you go back and think about organizations are going to have to be more like a Lego mode from a structure perspective. The ones that will win will be doing something like that. So how do you position yourself, or how do you help your employees develop the skills to be like, okay, now I'm over here. How do I do the sensing and how do I do the adaptability? The other thing actually that I'll say is I'm teaching a class on this on Monday is strategic pausing.
Yes. There's so much power in the pause.
There's so much power in the pause. And so like if things are going sideways and people aren't delivering, or the customer, because sometimes we can just chase the newest problem down a rabbit hole instead of bringing it up to the 10,000 foot view and be like, wait, are the right stakeholders still in the room? Are there too many stakeholders in the room? Has the goal shifted? Like all of those sort of like first principles things. And so it's like just normalizing the strategic pause. And it's sort of like the pulling the red flag in the Japanese factory. It's like time out. Like we need to take a minute.
Yeah, that is so important. just to kind of put a bow on this discussion of how do we actually drive real transformation, to kind of move away from the 70% failure, doom and gloom narrative that everybody's talking about, what's a better way to think about transformation? How can organizations that might be dealing with change fatigue, which is especially prevalent now, how could they reframe their approach to change?
It's a great question. I think that, like, as we've been talking about, there's no perfect words. Like, everyone's tired of the words, right? Everyone's tired of innovation and sustainability and transformation. And like, I don't know what the new word is, but like, this is the new normal. So it's not even really like, do you need to transform to survive? Yes. But it's like, how do you just become adaptable and agile? Like, you can't think of this. Transformation has this like one and done. We're going to do our digital transformation thing. That's just not the reality. Like, this is about re-examining the role of business in society and how we all show up. Like, this has profound implications. It's not just like putting a Band-Aid and solving, like rolling out a new ERP system. So I think like having the existential reflection about like, who are we and what does our vision look like, and providing clarity for everyone who's going down that path with you.
Yeah. And just to kind of sum up what I'm taking away from that, really, this is about identity.
Correct.
As a human, as a professional, and as your business and your place in the world.
That's right.
So, Shannon, how can listeners learn more about you and what you do?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Go to our website at catalystconstellations.com. We'd love to be in conversation.
Awesome. So there's one last question I wanted to ask you. I ask this of everyone. It's just part of my curious drive. So what is one thing that leaders could do today to shape a more awesome future?
I think it really, I can never do one thing. It's two things.
There's all totally in all the things. What's the thing that's most
self-awareness? Self-awareness. How are you showing up? And connected to that is the rejuvenation. If you are depleted, if you're facing change fatigue, your fuse is going to be short. You can't show up with that generosity and space holding that leaders need to bring today.
Oh, that's so important, Shannon. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your forward-thinking insights and fresh ideas with me today.
It's always so fun to have our conversations. I always leave super recharged. Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, I'm getting recharged right now. So
Totally.
Thank you. And to our listeners, if you're leading change in your organization and looking for fresh ways to make transformation stick, take a page from Shannon's playbook and empower your catalysts to rethink failure and focus on the human side of innovation. If this episode sparked some fresh ideas for you, let's keep the conversation going. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. Check out tomorrowzone.io. Until next time, stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.